thank you all for coming. And for the folks that are in the business plan competition, congratulations for getting this far. I wanted to make one suggestion that's specific to the business plan competition. Obviously, this boot camp is open to everyone, and these concepts are usable in any circumstance. They're not specific to the business plan competition. So I hope that this will be useful for you in this startup or your next startup or the one after that. But one important thing as it relates to the semifinal round. So for those of you in the semifinal round, you're going to submit a business plan, and then you're going to present your business plan. And that round is, for those of you who've done it before, the combined score of those two rounds determines who goes to the finals. And so one of the things you have to be careful to do, since your business is hopefully dynamic, it's changing all the time, you're learning things, and you're revising your thinking. And so it's technically possible that you submit a business plan, and then by the time you get to the presentations, you've modified your thinking, you've maybe improved your financial model, and things have changed. So you have to be very careful with how you present that change between the reading of the business plans and the presenting of the business plans. And the reason is very simple. It's the same judges. So the people that have read your plan, it's not guaranteed necessarily that it's the same, probably, right? It is the same. Okay, so 100%. And if, for example, you have a set of financial projections in your business plan, and then you've made substantial modifications to them because you've improved them, and now you're presenting them in which you should be improving all the time, so you should make these changes. But if you don't clarify for those judges what happened, they might come in with an evaluation of your written financial model, for example, and be confused by the new model unless you explain it. And so I just want to emphasize that the lean startup methodology is all about learning and all about relating that learning as you go along. What have we learned yesterday that we can apply tomorrow? And it's perfectly okay to share that thinking with the judges. In fact, I think the judges will be impressed by seeing what you've learned along the way to improve the model, to reduce the uncertainty about the business. So just make sure that you are clear about those changes. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So we're going to talk about, the agenda kind of said we're going to talk about channels and we're going to talk about revenue streams and so forth. And I guess I should have made this presentation about that stuff, but I didn't. It kind of is. But it's about something much more basic, which is the basic metrics that you need to think about in a startup. And if any of you watch the Steve Blank videos or you know anything about Steve Blank, I know some of you have taken some of my classes before, that so this will be kind of a broken record for you, is that small businesses, startups, they're not like big businesses. They're not like established companies. So it doesn't really make sense to take the planning approaches of a big company and just apply it to a small company. Just strip it down and apply it to a small company. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work at all. So when you think about the economic engine and the financial projections and the accounting for the business, it would be totally different. But there are some fundamental things that can be the same, and that's what we're going to talk about today with these metrics. So we'll begin with the end in mind. So the 4 metrics that I think are the most important are these. And we can give them this PDF, so you don't have to take copious notes if you don't want to, but you feel free to. And I'm going to go through each one of these today. So single unit economics, customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, and then an understanding of your market that I'm referring to as total addressable market, but it actually is a little bit more detailed about that. So let me just poll the room and see who's familiar with these concepts. So starting with the one on the bottom, do you know what TAM, SAM, SUM is? Have you heard that before? Just raise your hand if you have. Okay, a few people, that's good. So do you know what the formula for lifetime value of the customer is, which is normally called LTV? Okay, that's good. How about customer acquisition cost? Yeah, okay. the words, should imply a lot of what they're talking about, right? So customer acquisition cost, how much does it cost to get a customer? Lifetime value of that customer. What kind of value, profits can we make off that customer? Okay, and then single unit economics. It's interesting, I think single unit economics is the hardest one, and so we'll start with that. It seems like it should be the simplest one. So what we're talking about is in a single unit, thus the single unit economics, so one thing that you sell. So your business is about doing transactions. You offer something and you get something in return, probably money, right? You could probably get paid. So you could offer a service, you could offer a product. So what does one unit of that look like? So let's see if we can think about so if I sell a t-shirt, if I'm a t-shirt company, what's the one thing that I sell? Shirts, right? A shirt, one shirt, that's not that hard. Okay, how about if I'm a law firm?
Billable hour.
A billable hour, exactly. So you all jumped on services. Yeah, it's services, but the single unit economic that is trackable and tracked very carefully is the billable hour. So that's, a law firm that bills out at some ungodly amount per hour, is paying that lawyer hopefully some ungodly amount, but less godly or more godly, I don't know. So, and making a profit on the difference. So sometimes it's hard. What about is anybody working on an app or a online business? Okay, so for a digital business, what's the single unit economic? What's the one thing?
Users, download,
Hits.
subscription number.
So think about it. So you're not all wrong, but you're not all right either. So are you earning money off of that thing? So it could be dollars profit per user. So you have to put the profit per X. So you're kind of thinking about the X, but the single unit economic is the profit per X. So if I sell you something like a t-shirt and it costs me something to make that t-shirt, all those costs added up, I subtract it, and hopefully I have a little bit left over, and that's profit. So this is profit, if this is a t-shirt company, it's profit per shirt, okay? So when I was working at Coinstar, we had these kiosks that people would dump their change in, and we would charge them 8.9%, now it's 10%, it's a total ripoff, to turn their money into their money. And our single unit economic was one transaction. So, and I can tell you a lot about, I won't bore you with too much, but I'll bore you with this much. So the average, because we had a whole history of doing this, the average transaction was about $35. So your piggy bank, about that big, holds about $35 in change, 75% pennies. And then when you dump it in the machine, now they charge you 10%. So we would earn $3.50 off of that. And then we had to pay for people to take care of the machine, to pick up the change. We had to share some of that with Walmart and Safeway and all those places where our Coinstar machines are. And so that would come out. But we can tell you how much of that $3.50 ended up in our pocket as gross profit. And so we knew how many transactions. Turns out we do about 12 transactions a day. So if you multiply that, that works out to be about $15,000 a year per kiosk. And we paid about $10,000 to put the kiosk in. So we could have a gross profit, an annual gross profit about $5,000. And so you can start to calculate things like return on investment, and you can calculate things like break-even points. So how many machines with all of our people do we have to put out there in order for this thing collectively to make money? So you build up the financial model from the bottom like this. This is not the way it's taught in business school. Yes?
Now what if it's like ad-based?
So
it would be based on users, so the space would go up?
So then you would be probably trying to monetize something like cost per click or cost per CPM, which we're going to talk about, cost per 1,000 impressions. So, but yes, ads are part of it. And digital businesses have a number of ways that they actually monetize the customers. And so you have to be careful about thinking about all of them and making sure you're accounting for all of them. So one of the things that differentiates single unit economics is the way you sell your product, the way you get your products to the customer. So when we think of channels, we think of the channel between the producer and the user or the customer. So this one right here, which is, somebody makes a product and somebody buys a product. What's an example of a business that might be like that? There's nobody in between.
Tesla.
That's the model that they are trying to make work, right? Yeah, is that there's no intermediaries. So there's no agents or brokers or dealers and so forth. So down here, since most of my customers in my Coinstar days, most of my partners were big box retailers like Walmart, they look more like this, right? So, 5 steps. And there's somebody getting paid all the way along those ways. So you have to think about the single unit economics in a very detailed way. Again, we're selling one thing, but what are the inflows and outflows that work out hopefully to being a profit at one? So the reason that business schools do this, I'm not being fair, I'm sure there's plenty of schools and classes that teach this really well, but I know when I went to business school, the way we did it was you looked at the whole market, you thought about what your strategic advantages were in that market, which would allow you to get a share of that market, and then you estimated what reasonable share, like 1% of that market in the first year and 5% in the second year, because I'm going to compete and I'm going to win, and then you took that money out of that market and that became your revenue in year 1, year 2, year 3. It was a top-down way. It's really nonsensical if you think about it, but it works for some people. So here's an example of a single unit economics around books. I don't know, you probably never wondered this, but I have in the past, tried to make a run at self-publishing some fiction that I wrote, and I really was surprised by this model. So if you buy a book, an actual physical copy of a book for $25, probably people don't do that much anymore. I usually get my books at the library book sale, which if we end on time is going on up in Manoa right now. So we'll meet you there later. I'll meet you there later. So out of that, the retailer takes 7 out of the 25. The distributor takes $550 roughly. The publisher gets 10, and the author gets $250. So I don't know if that seems like a surprise to you that, Stephen King or John Grisham get $250 off each book. Did you think they would get more? Yeah. So for those guys, that ends up being a lot, right? You multiply $250 by how many units they sell, and that's their single unit economic, right? It ends up being good. But so there's this so the one thing to say is that the more complicated the channel, the more of the margin, which is the difference between the cost for you to make something and the price you have to sell it, the more complicated it's going to be, the higher it's going to be. So simplifying your distribution strategy is a way to keep more money in your pocket. So again, we're explaining the model on a per unit basis. So in a direct sales model, which this is a direct sales model at the top, we don't have to deal with agents and brokers and distributors. But we still have cost components, particularly if we're making a physical product. So here's an example right out of Steve Blank's Udacity videos. So I don't know what it is we're selling, but we're listing it for 100, we're discounting it by 10%, and people are generally paying $90 for it. Out of which you should know for your product how much is to make the product. So if I sold a $90 t-shirt, I would never buy a $90 t-shirt, but if I did, maybe it cost me $33 to manufacture it, and maybe it cost me another $20 to run the company that makes the shirts and sells the shirts, and so I expect to have $37 in profits So this combined 53, which I've cut off at the bottom, could be close to your customer acquisition cost. So that's how much money I have to spend to get that t-shirt that very expensive t-shirt in your hands. And these are ultimately very important components to a ratio that I'm going to talk about. So customer acquisition cost, so again, look at this one, it's 53. The cost to make it, deliver it, sell it, market it, all that added together is customer acquisition cost. So how much does it cost to acquire a single customer? Well, if you have startup costs, say you have to get an office, or you're opening a restaurant and you have to sign a lease and pay a deposit and put tables and chairs and fixtures in there and get ingredients to make food, all of that is startup costs. Let's say that costs you $50,000 and you open for business and one person walks through the door and that's your first customer. The customer acquisition cost for that one customer is $50,000. So you got to get more customers to reduce the customer acquisition cost, right? So basically everything that you spend is in the numerator, and the number of customers that results in is in the denominator. This is a massive oversimplification of the way business works, such that if people really understood this, they might not go to business school. So, shh. So here's an example with the $50,000. Let's say that that results in 1,000 new customers, all of that activity, all that selling, marketing, delivery, so forth. Then that's $50 per customer acquisition. So if I know that every time a customer walks in the door, it costs me $50 to get them there, what might I want in order to make this business worthwhile? Or what might I need?
Information-wise?
Well, no, money-wise. Yeah.
Them to spend more than $50 each time.
Yes, I need to take in more than 50 in order to make this worthwhile. In fact, if it's not even enough for them to buy $50 worth of stuff, because if they buy $50 worth of stuff, I still had to make that stuff. I don't put $50 in my pocket. I put something less than that. I had to make the t-shirt, which is now discounted down to 50. So I have to think about how much value I'm going to get from every one of my customers. And a creative way to think about it, particularly in an era where most businesses are having a relationship with their customer that goes beyond one time, you think about the lifetime value of the customer. Who has a Netflix subscription? Yeah. Everyone else is like stealing someone else's username and password. You know it. My father-in-law called me before this started. I didn't answer. I rejected the call, and I was sure it was going to be because, I was piggybacking on his cable account in the Northwest so that I could watch European soccer games, and I probably, he doesn't know the password because I have the password. So if you're selling a car, apologies to anyone who's a car dealer, but you might not expect to have a lifetime relationship with your car dealer. You might just expect to buy that car, and if it's a used car, probably the two people never want to see each other again after that, hopefully. And that would be a good ending to the relationship, right? Because that implies that, you're still mad about paying too much or not getting enough, but the car actually runs. It doesn't break down, immediately off the lot. So the lifetime value for something like that might literally just be however much it costs to buy the car or to sell the car and how much profit you have left over. Most businesses aren't like that, though. We think like Netflix, there's going to be this recurring relationship. Or you think like a game with in-app purchases. Right? Maybe the game is free and they make it up over time by getting you to buy things or getting you to see ads. So that's all part of the digital life we lead. So now, the way to think about lifetime value, you take the average value of, and I forgot to change this because this is wrong. It's not the sale, it's the average value of the profit. Well, I guess the average value of the sale, I could say the average value of the sale of a t-shirt that I sold for $20 is $10 if it cost me $10 to make it. So that maybe that's right, okay? So what I get in profit from one customer times how many, multiplied by how many times I can expect them to do business with me, multiplied by how long they'll do business with me. So I have a Netflix example later, but subscriptions are an easy way to think about this. If you pay $5 a month for a newspaper subscription, then the lifetime value of you as the customer is 5 times however many months they expect you on average to remain a customer, minus whatever it costs them to have you as a customer, okay? So here's a subscription example. $10 a month times 12 months. So this is, maybe it's a 1-year contract. So it renews after 1 year. So if 100% of the people that have this product quit after, or decide not to, then you would after 1 year, you expect the lifetime value to be $120 a month. Any questions about that lifetime value equation?
That might be kind of difficult to estimate though, right? Before you have like a history of transactions with your customers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the hard fact for you all is everything is difficult to estimate before you have the business up and running, but that's what you have to do. You have to plant the flag in the ground. It's like, this is our best estimate of what we're going to get out of one customer. So your single unit economic might be, one person buying one beverage, but your lifetime value is hopefully not that. It's hopefully it's a good product. They maybe have 2 in one visit, and they maybe come back X number of times a year. So you can still estimate lifetime value, and then you try to find out what that so you sort of set that up as a goalpost, I guess. Yeah, yeah, that's right. And then you go out in the real world with the business and you see if it looks like that. And if it doesn't look like that, you either try to make it look like that or you revise you move the goalposts. Okay. Yeah. Do you have a question?
What's the average year number that people would use? Because if we assume that everyone's going to live 99 years from the time they have our product, that'll just blow up our numbers.
So there's a really clever calculation for lifetime value that I don't go into a lot of good detail here, and that it relates to customer retention. And so it's a different way to look, it's a slightly different way to look at it, but I think mathematically it's coming out at exactly the same thing. So if 80% of your customers renew with you in the second year, that means that you're churning 20% or 10%, 20% of your customers, right? Just realized I might have my example in later wrong. I think I do. It was late last night when I made these changes. So we'll fix it. That means that every year you're losing 20% of your customers, and that means that the lifetime value could be calculated by taking the profit you make from somebody on an annual basis and dividing it by 20%.
Until it goes to 0 and use that.
Well, no, that number works out to be whatever it works out to be. Yeah?
Do you have any advice for, say hypothetically, if there was a tiered subscription, like how would you calculate, oh yeah, this many customers will take this top tier, middle tier, bottom tier? Average them together. So how do you figure out which ones? Well, I think what I would do is assume that at first, because people are quite frugal by nature, so at first everyone is going to take the cheapest one. And then if you're doing a subscription as a service, as I understand what you're saying, the middle tier is better. So maybe a certain percentage of them like the product and convert after a time to the higher one. And then a smaller percentage of those like that and convert to the premium tier. So instead of thinking that, out of this pool of customers, this percent will take the premium and this percent will take the
basic. I would do it as if everybody starts with the basic and then moves up, and then, and you can build a financial model like that. Yeah. Hi, Zach. So now what you should start to see is that there's a relationship between customer acquisition costs and lifetime value, which is the essence of all business school boiled down into one thing right here: buy low, sell high, right? Not that complicated. But it's complicated because of the people involved. I mean, business would be awesome if there weren't any people, right? Because we all have competing motivations and competing wants and desires, competing goals, and that messes everything up. So, but the patently obvious relationship should be that if your customer acquisition cost is more than your lifetime value, then you have a money-losing business. And that might be okay now if you have a strategy to right that ratio in the near term, but you can't ever turn that around. I mean, you can't ever make profits with the model as it stands. Doing more of it isn't going to help you make more money. You have to do it differently, right? Same thing if your customer acquisition cost equals your lifetime value. Right? That's as if I opened a bank and the bank was called the change bank. And what we do is we give you change. You bring us your bills and we give you your change for it. And so you bring me $1 and I give you 4 quarters. That's the business. And I make all my money on volume. That won't work, will it? It doesn't matter if you bring me $1 million and I give you 4 million quarters, I still haven't made any money. I've actually made a lot more work for myself. So that's this formula. So your customer acquisition cost has to prove out ultimately to be lower than your lifetime value. And this is all based on solid thinking about your single unit economics. So instead of hoping that things go better over time, you have to model it out as, to start with, you set it up being favorable assumptions because you want to make money. And then you prove it out in the marketplace. And it probably almost definitely won't work out the way you modeled it, but over time, maybe you can become more efficient. And I'll explain some ways when we go into a little bit more detail about different types of single unit economics. So we talked about a few. We talked about digital ventures. I talked about subscriptions. We talked about t-shirts. So I think probably in this room, all 3 of those businesses are represented. Those business models. That's what that's called, a business model. But those aren't the only ones. There's plenty of others out there. Or ones that are kind of blended, or ones that have all of those in there together, like the digital venture where you make money by showing people ads on a website, but you make money when they buy something on that same website, or you make money when they click through to another website and they buy something on that website. Those are 3 different, and also you collect all that data and you sell that data to someone else. Those are 4 business models in one web or app-based product, right? So let's talk about the 3 main ones. And please stop me anytime if you have any questions or if you're just bored. So physical products, digital ventures, software as a service, others. So let's go through each one. Oh, that came out really blurry. That was a beautiful picture of SodaStream that I stole off the internet last night. Oh well. You know what SodaStream is, right? Okay. It's a razors and razor blades model. They sell you a device and this cartridge, and then when this cartridge runs out, because I'm addicted to carbonated water, I have to go out and buy more. And so they make a lot more money off of these cartridges than they do off of this device. So that's kind of a good model that's a good physical product model. So when you have a physical product, you focus on what price you sell it, how much it costs to sell that product. Think of my t-shirt example. Sales price, $20, cost of goods sold, $10. You can get efficiencies from scale, because maybe the first t-shirt I made it cost me a lot to make a t-shirt, but when I made 100 or I made 1,000 or I made 10,000, the cost per t-shirt goes down from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7. And so, but if my sales price stays the same, then I have more profit. That's called economies of scale. And it's important to analyze your business model to see if there's economies of scale in your business. So, but know that not all businesses have economies of scale. Some have scale like this, which is a departure between the curves of cost and revenue. The part in between is profits. It looks like this. This is, well, it's always up and to the right for you guys, so it's this way. So that way, yeah. Some businesses don't have scale, so the lines are parallel, right? You're always gonna make 10%. There are some businesses like that. And some have reverse economies of scale, meaning the more you do something, the less money you make. Sometimes that's artificial, like somebody who opens a restaurant and has a profitable business and decides to open a second restaurant and a third restaurant and a fourth restaurant, and then those extra costs pile on, and that extra administrative cost pile on and make the whole business less profitable. That can happen. So if I had a physical product, these are the things I'd focus on. I'm using a t-shirt example, obviously. $10 COGS, $10 of gross profit. Remember, lifetime value should be gross profit. If you can do a quick Google search and find 1 million explanations of these metrics, lifetime value, customer acquisition cost, all these other churn, retention rate, and so forth. But many of them get this lifetime value thing wrong because they use sales, not profit. And that's an egregious abuse of financial modeling, in my view. Yeah. Okay. So after all of my costs, I have $2.50 left over. So I'm comparing the costs of operating back to the gross profit, okay? In this case, $7.50 is less than $10, so that means that if this model, if at the single unit economic level, this model appears to make a profit, and so it might be worth doing more without changing anything else. Sometimes you have to be careful when you're learning, when you're trying to shine a light on all this uncertainty about the business. You have to be careful not to change too many things as you're going along, because then you don't know what caused that result. So I like to think about it almost like a scientific experiment or a recipe. Like if I just try to guess at all the ingredients, try to remember all the Joya cooking recipe for pancakes, it never comes out right. If I follow the recipe exactly, I've been told that I make the best pancakes in a family, but I have to follow it precisely. And if I change all of them, it's just a mess. But if you change one thing, you kind of have some control over it. So when you're experimenting, which you should be with this early stage business, try not to change too many things all at the same time. That would mean like, don't change your price, change your marketing strategy, change the manufacturing partner that you have, and fire your whole team and hire a new one. Don't do all that all at one shot. And expect to have a predictable result, right?
And another thing I think that's important when you're talking about scale is quality control in particular. Just because you've seen it when you come to restaurant example,
Yeah.
or let's say franchise or try to expand to a restaurant. They just
That's
really
right.
control
That's right.
the quality of their product.
I mean, anybody go to Starbucks this morning? Is this Starbucks coffee? It is? So what do you think about Starbucks coffee? This is an example.
Expensive.
Well, no, but the taste. What do you think about the taste of a cup of Starbucks coffee? It's burnt, right? It's always burnt. Do you know why it's burnt?
Roasted too high quantity.
But don't you think Starbucks knows how to roast coffee? So they're intentionally over roasting the coffee. because that's the only way that they can consistently deliver the same flavor in every store. It's intentionally over-roasted. I went to a coffee training at Starbucks headquarters once because we had them as a business partner, and it was like a coffee 101 course, and I learned that from them. Like, you're intentionally over-roasting your coffee. That's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
They're actually making a bad cup of coffee on purpose.
Well, you know, they're usually a milk company. I mean, they're really a milk company anyway. You know, it's just there's a very tiny piece of it is coffee. But that's the point, is that, to your point, Michael, the quality control is really, really difficult. And so that's a measure to that's put in place for the purposes of quality control. Consistency, so sacrificing quality for consistency, that's a trade-off that they're choosing to make in order to get scale. Yeah. Okay, so this is Archimedes, and he said, if you give me a lever that's long enough and a place to stand, I can move the world. It sounds cool in Italian, even though I don't speak Italian. And so I guess this is the world. So we have different leverage in our business model, and in the product company, these are some examples. These are not all the examples. So if I'm selling a product or I'm selling T-shirts, I might upsell other things, right? I might have something that goes with a T-shirt. I might have other T-shirts. I might have a warranty doesn't really make sense for a T-shirt company, but you've all probably bought headphones and then they've tried to sell you a warranty on it. Don't buy that. That's a total ripoff. In my opinion. Or replacement parts. The SodaStream example is a great example of, like, what is their business model? Is it selling a product that makes carbonated water? Or is it really they're selling high pressure canisters of CO2 that you have to get here in Oahu, even though I have 6 of them in my house in Seattle, because I can't get them here. I can't ship them. They won't deliver them. You can't carry them on. You can't put them in your bag. It's like a bomb. So, but that's a wonderful business, right? That they have they've accessorized. They have flavors that you can buy if you wanted to make flavored soda. So those are all things that you can change to improve the relationship between customer acquisition cost and lifetime value, okay? So let's talk about digital ventures for a bit. So I'm not necessarily talking about e-commerce companies here. So a traditional e-commerce company would be a company that used to sell something in brick and mortar stores and now sells something online. So Amazon would be a great example of that. So they're selling their products digitally, but they're not a digital company. So in this case, what I'm talking about is, so you see in the background here, there's LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest. That's what I'm talking about, Facebook. These are digital ventures. They're not really selling any type of product at all. So in digital ventures, what you need to worry about is, first of all, how do people find out about you so that they can either go to your website, download your app, or somehow interact with you in the digital world? How much does it cost you to get them to come to you? So that's CPM. From anyone who's taken a marketing class has probably learned about cost per 1,000 impressions. That's what CPM means. So all the ad world is driven by cost per 1,000 impressions. It's about $32 according to this chart that I showed Anissa yesterday in my marketing class. It's about $32 per 1,000 impressions if you're a newspaper, a printed newspaper. And it was about 25 cents per 1,000 impressions if you're advertising on Facebook on average. So what I said yesterday, which I still think is true 24 hours later, is that if it seems like Facebook would be a cheaper way to advertise to 1,000 people. That's true, but the quality of that experience is not necessarily the same. there might be some reasons why it's better to pay $32 to get 1,000 people to see your ad than 25 cents. It just might, maybe the nature of the experience is, I guess there's ways online that we ignore ads, so that might be the one thing, yeah?
So conversion rates are lower.
Yes, exactly right, yeah. So Dave McClure, the founder of 500 Startups, has a very good description of the metrics that you would want to track if you were a digital venture to cover the complete relationship with a customer. He calls them his pirate metrics because the acronym is R. It's acquisition, activation, revenue, retention, referral. And so you measure each one of those steps along the way. So think about it as a funnel, right? I paid 25 cents on Facebook to get 1,000 people to come to my website, but I didn't necessarily make any money off of them. They have to do something there. Maybe they have to register, they have to sign up for the service, they have to decide that they want to pay $10 a month to get Netflix, or $7 a month for Movie Pass or whatever. So some smaller percentage will convert to being a paying customer, and then an even smaller percentage of those might actually be a good customer and stay with me, or be a repeat customer, and a smaller percentage of those will love me and refer me to a friend. And those are the customers we're really looking for here today. So in this example, I've paid 50 cents per click. I apologize to people who've heard these stories before, but I read recently that if you want to be the first result on Google for everybody that puts in the word lawyer, so you search the word lawyer and the first result is paying $1,000 per click. So that means that everybody that clicks on their link from Google is causing them, that law firm, if it's a law firm, to pay Google $1,000 per click. So the more general the search term and the higher the result, the more expensive the price is going to be. So there's all sorts of interesting search engine optimization strategies for getting around those high costs. Obviously, that's an extreme example if the average cost is about 50 cents. So let's say that my campaign drove 10,000 people to the site, and out of them, 10% registered. So that would be 1,000 people that registered, and 1% purchased of the 10%. So 100 people purchased something. So that means that in order for me to have a break-even point where it costs me $5,000 no matter what, because they clicked on the site, and I paid to have my ads, perhaps, appear in places that would drive people to my site. So if people come to my site, I'm paying, even if I don't get any revenue. So this is where customer acquisition cost equals lifetime value. So in order for this to be worthwhile, I have to make 50 bucks per customer. That's the lifetime value break even. That's one way to think about it. So my levers then are how many times I can get people to come back and buy more, what can I do things to improve the conversion rate? Can I mess with the pricing? So Amazon Prime is a great example of this, right? Amazon Prime was $50 a year when they first launched. And what you got was free shipping. And then it didn't seem like a super great deal unless you were buying a decent amount of stuff on Amazon. But then they added a bunch of things. The Amazon Prime members, there were some movies to watch, or there was some music and so forth. So then I was like, okay, well, it's not as good as Netflix, or it's not as good as iTunes, but I'm getting free shipping too, so it feels pretty good. So I feel like I'm getting good value out of that. And then they changed their price to $100. And they were able to pull that off with almost no drop, with no increase in churn, because they'd added a lot of value during that time. So they were messing with the price points, but while they were messing with the price points, they were also improving, they were changing the nature of that experience. So then another model is called subscription as a service. We usually think about this in the context of, say, a Netflix example. So here's this example again. So the metrics we focus on then are, how long can we keep people as customers? Who has a Netflix? Oh, it was everybody, except the people that were lying. And so I'm guessing many of you have had a subscription for a long time. I think I've had it since, well, as long as maybe 2002 or 3 or something like that. Pardon?
Since Redbox.
Yeah, it was before Redbox, actually before Redbox, yeah. But, you know, when they mailed the movies home. And so I don't know what their average lifetime value is, but I looked at their earnings reports, and I think I did this math wrong now. Oh, no, I did it right. Maybe. No, I did it wrong. Yeah. So I know from their earnings reports that their retention rate is 90%. So they have a roughly 10% churn. All I did is I put this number in wrong. So that needs to be a 9. So mark that down. So the way to think about that is that I got from their earnings report that they have that they generate about $120 a year in revenue per customer off of their monthly fee, and it costs them about $70 to deliver that service. So the $70 from every customer goes to pay for the content and pay for the developers that deliver the content and pay for all the distribution deals and rights and so forth. And so what they have left over is $50. So if they have a 90% conversion rate, then that means that 90% of the people stay for another year. I was really surprised that it wasn't 99%, because I've never known anyone that sort of willingly dropped their Netflix account. But so that means that in the second year, you could expect on average to get another 45 from them. So you might think of a 2-year lifetime value as being $95. That's what that should be. Yes?
For the retention rate, does that just count for previous, does that include new business as well?
So retention rate is the opposite of churn. So the number of customers in period 2 that were also in period 1, right? So if I get 1,000 customers in the first year and then 900 of them I still have in the second year, I have new customers as well. So you're not spiraling downward, but if that's the way to think about retention rate. And so you can have this expectation that your lifetime value is iterative like that. And that's why you can divide the $50 by the 10 to get a $500 lifetime value per customer. So that means that Netflix has a pretty good business. They're spending about $70 to get you as a customer, and they're getting about $500 off of you over the your lifetime. It feels like more somehow. I don't know. A rule of thumb that I've read, which I don't know if this is right, but it kind of makes sense to me, is that a good ratio between lifetime value and customer acquisition cost is 3 to 1. So obviously we know that 1 to 3 is not good, and 1 to 1 is not good, or 3 to 3 is not good, but 3 to 1 lifetime value implies that you probably have a profitable business. I'm not accounting for all the other costs there are in operating a business. I mean, we have depreciation, we have amortization, we have taxes, we have all of the things that gut our profits. So having a 3 to 1 ratio, meaning every time I spend $1, I get 3. That should be a good positive relationship. So if you have a model that's showing a 10-to-1 ratio, if you show that to me, I would probably think that you're underestimating the cost of running the business. And if you show me one that's 2-to-1, I would probably worry about you being able to demonstrate, a long-term profitability. So these are just rules of thumb. There's plenty of businesses that are exceptions to that. Okay, so then the last one is total addressable market. There's this terrible business people come up with just the worst acronyms, TAM, SAM, and SOM. I don't know what that, and there's disagreement even about what these actually stand for. So think about it like a beachhead market. This is, brave soldiers storming the beaches at Normandy. They're creating a beachhead. That means that they're creating a safe landing spot from which they can expand, from which they can move into the rest of Europe, right? So you're looking for a beachhead market. That's a collection of customers to start with. So the wrong way to think about it is that I open them for business and I get a few customers, therefore that proves that my business model works. No, that just proves that eventually somebody walked by your lemonade stand and decided to buy your lemonade. So there's always going to be customers. But the customers that you want are these beachhead customers, and I'll explain why these are different types of people. So when we think about total addressable market, we're trying to get this picture of if everybody in the market bought from us. That's not everyone in the world. I think I said this last time, that doesn't work unless you're selling oxygen. So we're looking for your best customers. So this guy, Everett Rogers, not to get too academic-y and geeky on you, came up with this technology adoption curve in 1962. And it can also be thought of as a customer adoption curve. So it's just a bell curve, right? So some people will buy anything. They're innovative. They'll try everything. And some people will never buy anything. My father-in-law, who called me, was probably calling, to get advice about how to reboot his wireless router, because I'm his tech, virtual tech support. Doesn't matter where I live, and because he's a laggard in terms of learning technology. That's just the way it is. He's always going to be a laggard as it learns to technology. I'm always going to be a laggard as it comes to social media, I guess. So your beachhead market is these people right here. Your early adopters, not the people who will just buy anything or who happen to walk by when you open your store for business, but the people that came in and loved what you offered, and that they're willing to actually tell others about you. That's why it's so important to get them. So there's this book by Jeffrey Moore called Crossing the Chasm that really goes into a lot of detail about this challenge. He envisions this chasm between the early adopters and the early majority. So you're not going to really be a profitable business, a growing business, unless you can get this group of customers. So it's careful to remember that this does not represent everyone in the world. So this isn't 7 billion people spread out among these divisions. This is all the people that would reasonably be interested in buying your product. So some of you are selling products and services that I'm not your target customer, and I probably never will be. And so I'm a vegetarian, so if you're selling meat products, right, I'm not in there. And you shouldn't try to sell to me. You should focus on the meat eaters. So this chasm exists because everybody is a little bit pessimistic and a little bit habituated to the way they live. And they don't change their habits very easily. So I think you can think of plenty of examples where you are perfectly satisfied with the service you have, and there's no real reason to switch. I'm apparently very satisfied with my Netflix subscription, and I find no reason to switch. Or actually what I found was I just add other services, because I have kids and they nag me. So now I have Hulu, you know, all these other things, but I haven't switched. And if you were gonna get me to switch off of Netflix, you would have to have a pretty compelling offer to get me to switch. I mean, it would probably have to be cheaper and faster and better, all of those three things. And those are three dimensions that are almost impossible to move in a positive direction all at the same time. So we focus on these early adopters because these people are never gonna buy. These people, it's gonna take them a while to, but these people are gonna tell these people to buy your product. So this group of early adopters, this is a loving relationship you have with these customers. And it might be a relatively small market, but that's where you start. My favorite example is always Facebook. They started with the goal of turning the Facebook, which was a physical book that had the pictures and profiles of Harvard students, into putting it online. That was their goal. That was their beachhead market. They didn't have world domination in mind. It seems like that in hindsight, but they did not. They had only Harvard students in mind for their beachhead market. And these circles aren't to scale, but because that worked so well and that they were able to easily transfer that to the next still niche market, which was university students in general. So that was order of magnitude bigger, but it was very similar. So if they'd started Facebook with the idea of getting all university students to put their profiles on this, you can see how that would have been a much harder challenge. It's not nearly as compelling. So focus is super important. Dave McClure calls that niche to win. And then in the Facebook example, of course, we know what happened after that. It turns out that everyone would use Facebook, and it's actually most popular among people that aren't college students, that are working adults. So think about it as moving outward. So they're not really sort of color coordinated. So here's the bell curve of customers, and you're moving from here to here to here. And you're getting more and more people in your market. But your strategy, your go-to-market strategy that the judges want to see in the business competition is how are you going to get those people, those early adopters, the people who love you. There's a very important reason for that relates to product market fit. So people who love you, they love you because what you offer gives them so much value, or they perceive so much value in it, that they're happy to tell other people about it. And they stay with you longer. So obviously they have Netflix has good product market fit with me. So this is a slight graph about the theorized retention rate for a company that has product market fit and a product that doesn't. So you have a steady drop off with most products. So think about the apps on your phone that you downloaded. They seemed like they were pretty cool. And then unless you're really tidy about the way you manage your phone, which I'm not, it's probably still on there and you haven't opened it in a couple of years. And you're like, I could delete this, but that seems like too much work, so I'm just going to leave it there. Right? That's what's happening with this, right? And it might be even steeper. But a product that has product market fit is one that you perpetually go back to, that's sticky, that's always adding something new for you. Netflix is very sticky that way, and Surfline is very sticky that way for us here. So one way to know that you're in your beachhead market, that you have a well-defined beachhead market, is everybody kind of looks the same. They all buy similar products. They buy it in similar cycles. And this is the most important thing, they all talk to each other. Or they're willing to talk to each other. You know who these people are. These people who are your friends who are telling you, did you try this app? You have to get this app. You have to try it. You must. Or you have to go to this restaurant. Or you have to travel to this place, right? Those are people that are your early adopters that love you. I meant to skip this slide, but yes?
If
If you go back to the previous slide,
Yeah.
what does WOM stand for?
Oh, I'm sorry, I said it fast. Word of mouth marketing. That's what yeah, thank you. Word of mouth marketing. The reason this is important, word of mouth marketing, is that most people say that the most influential, the biggest influence on their buying decisions are their friends and family and people they trust. And it works out to be like 80% of the buying decision is driven by the power of word of mouth. So your objective, if you want to have a growth engine, is to figure out how to tap into word of mouth. And the mistake people most make, in my classes I usually have this tirade I go into about virality and social media, but word of mouth, the mistake people make is that they think that word of mouth means that I tell a lot of people, and they'll tell a lot of people, and they'll tell a lot of people. And that's not really the way things work. The way things work with word of mouth is that you offer a service that's so valuable to this set of customers that they are compelled to share that value with other people. So then you're not paying anything for getting new customers after that. So PayPal or Venmo is one of my go-to examples, because we all care about money, and if I send you money, and in order to get the money from PayPal, what do you have to do? You have to have a PayPal account. So what a great viral strategy that is, right? Every time I get one customer, I get another customer. That's called a viral coefficient. It's a very important aspect of the product design, and not everybody has that in the product design, and that's okay, but that creates a word of mouth type of scenario. So try to avoid, when you're pitching the judges, saying something like, when they ask you what your go-to-market strategy is, try to avoid saying this, and I'm going to listen for it, just because I'll be so frustrated if I hear it. It's just a personal pet peeve, but I've heard it so many times, which is, we're going to use social media, and it's going to go viral. Or they say, we're going to use social media, word of mouth, and it's going to go viral. So that's the strategy that says, what's your go-to-market strategy? I'm going to tell a lot of people. That's not how viruses spread. Viruses spread because there's something inherent in the product that causes people to tell other people. And you probably don't have that. Most businesses don't have a viral strategy. But the word of mouth part is important. So think about designing a go-to-market strategy where the customers have those characteristics where they're all the same. So if you're trying to sell to me, and you're also trying to sell to Jack, and you're trying to sell, well, I'll just use those two examples. Like there's some things about us that are the same, and there's some things about us that are very different. We're very different in age. And there's some products where age doesn't matter, but there's some products that they really do. So you have to dimensionalize your marketing strategy to make sure that you're not trying to sweep everyone in. That's another mistake, is to, when someone asks you who your customer is, you think, oh, everyone is, because everyone can benefit from this service. Yeah, that's true. But most people don't want to switch. Okay? Does that make sense on total addressable market? Okay. I'm going to go a little faster because I want to give you a break. But I'm almost done, I think. So the trick here is not to invest a lot in growing your business until you've already achieved product market fit, which is this point where your beachhead market, you know who that is, and you know they're responding to your offer. So they should all look very similar in some way. When you look at your customers in your customer discovery, if you talk to 100 people, and you're getting like 80% of them are saying that this is awesome, when can I get this product, I'll definitely buy, that's not enough. You want to know why. What is it about those 80% that's making them react that way? And if it turns out that all of them are college age, then that's your beachhead market. So you probably don't care about me anymore in that scenario. Or if it turns out that they're all women, same thing. That's your beachhead market, maybe women of college age in that case. And you probably don't care about me, so don't waste time trying to market to me. And don't include that in your marketing strategy. Judges puzzle over businesses where their introspection doesn't serve them very well. So what I mean by introspection is when you think about, like, what would I do? And we have this tendency to use ourselves as a sample of like n equals 1. Like, yeah, I would use that service, so therefore everyone else must use that service, so I'm in. And judges they're fallible in this way also. So you want to make it very clear to them who your customers are, who you're targeting, and why. And the smart judges, the thoughtful judges will realize that they're not in that group. And so they shouldn't use introspection to decide whether it's a good business or not. So the last thing about total addressable market is, this is about counting noses. Knowing how many people are in the beachhead market. So the calculation is very simple. You take everybody in your beachhead market, you multiply it by how much you're going to make from them, either revenue per user or profit per user. Revenue per user is okay in this case. And that's your total addressable market. That's the biggest, that's the best it will ever get. In fact, it will never get that way, right? Because you can't reasonably expect everyone to buy from you. That'll never happen. Unless you're selling oxygen.
Is that revenue of user per year or like?
Yeah, no, it could be revenue per year. Yeah, usually total addressable market is stated on an annual basis. So, so you have these concentric circles. Total addressable market is everyone in your target market. It's not a number that you're actually shooting for, but the relationship between that number and what you're shooting for can be pretty important. So at Coinstar, when I left, we had 25% of the households in the United States had tried a Coinstar machine before. And when I started in 2010, this had nothing to do with me because I wasn't in marketing, but I wasn't even in the coin counting business. But it started with like 19%. So we'd moved it up by 6 percentage points. And so what that meant was that, well, a quarter of every household, we counted, we figured every household, shared the same coin jar. They had used our machine before, and that worked out to be about $250 million a year in revenue for us. So that meant there was $750 million in potential revenue that had never tried the Coinstar machine before. So our share of the market was 25%. And so if our total addressable market, if it worked out differently and for some reason, let's say there were only 25 million households in the or 30 million households in the US, and we already had hit 25 million of them, it would look not that attractive to an investor, right? Because our maximum potential is only a little bit more than what we're already doing now. So that you have to think about that as well. There's this, what I call the cursed attractiveness of large markets. So every investor wants to see a really large market. We talked about that if you came to Bootcamp 1. And so you might think about that large market is that total addressable market. They want to see that to be large. And then what you're targeting is to knock off a reasonable piece of that market. But you don't really ever want to hit the ceiling on that market. So if we had $1 billion a year in revenue from the coin counting machine, we would be done. We could only grow by the population rate. That wouldn't be that attractive, yeah.
When you guys do get to $1 billion, when would you start considering like mergers and acquisitions to get into a different market?
Well, we did that. That's why I said I wasn't really in the coin counting business, because all of the business that we started had nothing to do with coin counting. So we started Redbox, and we started a coffee kiosk, and we started a phone recycling kiosk called Eco ATM. And so we were afraid enough of even that $1 billion wasn't a really big market, and we wanted to make sure that we remained to our investors like a growth opportunity. And so that's why we invested in all those other businesses. So we were making that decision. That's actually why they hired me for the job in the first place, because they were smart enough to not to hire me, but to realize that they needed somebody like me to help them diversify.
Is there any patterns to when you get to a certain size of your market share that they'd be like, oh, they're about 50%, maybe they should look at different markets?
I mean, there probably is for if you're a publicly traded company, because analysts care about that stuff. But for your worlds with startups, you know, what we want to see is that there's a huge potential market in the future that you're going to tap into. You know, if you were facing the problem that the relationship between your share of the market and your total addressable market was close to 1, you wouldn't be here, you know, because there wouldn't be a business opportunity at all. So I think it might be an intuitive thing, but I don't know of any formula that says, oh, once you've achieved 25% of your total addressable market, nobody cares. The closest thing I could say is that mature markets usually have a couple of major players in it, and they might dominate 30% or 40% of the market, 1 or 2 players, and then everyone else has to split up the rest. And that's a kind of a mature market that might not have that much growth. Yes?
If you're like rolling out in segments, you're starting off with one small segment and moving up, do you suggest doing the calculations for each of the different segments? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Do it for each of the segments, and pick a segment to start with, because you don't want to go after, you want to have focus, right? So you can see what I'm drilling down here as an example. So the last thing is when you drill down, I promise, Tracy, it's the last thing. When you drill down, you validate then with customer interviews. So can you prove to us that this beachhead market will respond to your service? And the way you prove it to us is that you've gone out and you've talked to 100 people in that beachhead market, and they're all giving you very high scores on the Net Promoter Score. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to tell your friends about this product or service? And you're getting 8s, 9s, and 10s. And you can do that through customer interviews. Okay? Sorry, that was longer than I intended. I'm done though.